All right, thanks everyone for joining our webinar on ZDHC MRSL Level 1 Conformance Programs, what you may not know about chemical assessments for textiles. When you joined today, you were all placed on mute, but you can use the chat function to ask questions throughout, and we'll leave some time at the end to get to those. This webinar is being recorded and will be available in the coming days to refer back to or share with your colleagues. I'm going to introduce our speakers today. Jeff Wilson is our Senior Business Development Manager within our Sustainability Division, and Hannah Richardson is a Senior Certification Project Manager. They'll be both on to go through the presentation and answer any questions you may have. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Jeff.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Again, welcome to the webinar. Very pleased you can be here. So, as always, starting out with agenda and what we're trying to achieve, you guys. So, our agenda today is to provide really a brief overview of ZDHC and the MRSL, Manufacturing Restricted Substance List, and the conformance model associated with it. And then we want to dive into our two programs that support Level 1 conformance associated with the MRSL. And then we'll finish up taking any of your questions. So what are we trying to do here? Really, it's very simple. You guys, our goal at the end of the day is that you walk away with a solid understanding of the two programs that we offer, and that in the context of the ZDHC MRSL conformance programs that are out in the marketplace, that you're better able to make informed choices on these programs as you adopt safer chemical management practices. So pretty simple. Anyway, next slide, Ryan, please. I'll start with a brief context setting around ZDHC and the MRSL, and then we'll shift over to our program offering. So, Ryan, next slide. I imagine many or some of you are familiar with ZDHC and the MRSL, but I don't want to assume all of you are up to speed, especially when it comes to the conformance levels. So what is ZDHC? In November of 2011, numerous global brands did sign a commitment to achieve zero discharge of hazardous chemicals by 2020, kind of largely motivated and generated by the Greenpeace Detox Dirty Laundry campaign. The commitment is achieved through various ZDHC programs that address management of chemical utilization in the supply chain, in production, MRSL being one of those. There's also wastewater, sludge, and as some of you may know, the relatively new fiber production chemistry work that's going on. So there are a handful, obviously, of programs that ZDHC is offering to address management of chemicals in production. And I think probably as everyone recognizes, I believe ZDHC has evolved to become a critical organization for the industry and collaborating together on a pathway of continuous improvement to address safer chemistry in our industry. So next slide, Ryan. One of the things relative to the MRSL that many people don't know is this pyramid model of continuous improvements at conformance levels. And so the conformance level model is reflected in this pyramid diagram that pretty much highlights a pathway of continuous improvement up the pyramid from level 1, which largely can be considered really as a foundational entry point to better chemicals management. And that generally entails either document reviews and or lab testing in the level 1 programs that are out there. And again, two of those we are showcasing today, which we'll get into shortly. Then the idea is that there's a progression for any chemical supplier to then certify and move up the pyramid to level 2, which is at the progressive level of improvement, largely about product, in addition to chemicals, is about product stewardship in chemical manufacturing, supported essentially by various document reviews. And then finally, at the tip, at the third level aspirational point of progression at level 3, which is product stewardship fundamentally again, but it actually entails on-site chemical manufacturing, audit, and visit. I think the core idea here is that the industry just pragmatically, realistically, cannot simultaneously and immediately ascend to an aspirational level of chemicals management. As much as we all probably would want that, that's why it's aspirational. There needs to be a pathway of improvement with multiple points of progression along the way with various entry points depending on where a chemical supplier may be. But it's also important to note, you'll see there that level 0 supplier declaration. That self-reporting level is going away shortly. And to that very point, it's important to understand that level 1 through level 3 conformances are conducted by ZDHC authorized and approved third-party objective assessors, NSF International being one. So bottom line, self-reporting at level 0 will no longer be an option in this conformance model. Next slide, Ryan, please. So who the heck is NSF International? Many of you don't know us, relatively new to the textile space. And why NSF International? Excuse me. So we're a globally recognized expert in toxicology and chemistry, have been involved for decades and decades in this work in different sectors. We have 100,000 plus chemical products that have been evaluated by NSF toxicology's professionals in our food division, our water division, dietary supplements. We have significant experience through other programs such as our work in the US EPA Safer Choice, Clean Ingredients, our green screen work, and ToxFMD screen program chemistry that we'll talk about. With global chemical suppliers, we are a known organization. And we have 75 years of being involved in toxicology, chemistry, biochemistry, environmental chemistry, etc. So we're not newbies to chemistry and toxicology. We have a broad and deep expertise. Next slide, Ryan. So we offer also, just for you guys' information, we have other services that we offer to the industry, the global textile industry, including auditing and certifying to the full suite of textile exchange preferred material standards that you see here on the slide, and many of you are familiar with, such as the Responsible Down Standard, Responsible Wool Standard, as well as our own Global Traceable Down Standard. In addition, we offer the Emerging Regenerative Organic Certification, probably many of you heard about, to our sister company, Quality Assurance International, and of course the two textile chemistry services that we show here. So Ryan, next please. So what is ZDHC Level 1 conformance, perhaps in a little bit more detail? So it means that the chemical formulation does not contain any of the chemical substance that are listed on a ZDHC MRSL above the threshold commercial formulation limit values. 11 categories of chemicals, multiple chemical ingredients that are in that. Won't go into the details of that, but that's essentially what it does, does the review of those, and that it is not above those threshold formulation limit values. NSF, we are approved by ZDHC to work with chemical suppliers to indicate level 1 conformance, and we do that through these two programs, and we provide those certifications and report into the ZDHC Gateway, the chemical module, through our certifications to both programs. Next slide, please, Ryan. So at a very high level, and Hannah's going to describe these more in detail for you, but in comparing the two programs, our NSF Basic Level 1 Conformance covers the formulations assessed against the ZDHC Manufacturing Restricted Substance List. That's Group B version 1.1, so largely a document review. It is a foundational level assessment that is relatively quick in review and assessment and is actually very, very quite affordable. And Level 1 has numerous brands that support this in the marketplace. ToxFMD screen chemistry goes beyond restricted substance list and even MRSL to assess human and environmental hazards associated with certain chemicals and formulations. So it incorporates hazard assessment protocols into the program. It's a more rigorous assessment as a result that requires a fair bit more time and as a result is more costly. ToxFMD screen chemistry is supported by numerous global apparel brands, including Levi Strauss, H&M, and CNA. And so with that, let's get into the meat of the programs in some more detail and nerd out with Hannah. So Hannah, over to you, please.
Thank you, Jeff. So you can go to the next slide, Ryan. So over the next little part of the webinar, I am going to be discussing the process overviews for both NSF's ZDHC MRSL Level 1 and our ToxFMD reviews. You can go to the next slide, Ryan. So the programs do share the same main 4 steps. However, I will highlight the differences as we go along. And just a quick overview, the first step of the process is the submission form and application. Step 2, we will discuss obtaining completed supplier information. Step 3, I will go into a little bit more detail about the formulation assessment for both programs. And in step 4, I will discuss the deliverables. So in step 1, upon your initial inquiry to NSF, the first item that you will receive from us is an application. And on this application, we will request some basic corporate company information like your address, project contacts, billing information. Additionally, we will request that you provide us with the manufacturing facility locations for your products, as well as the list of products that you're applying for review. And with that, we will ask that you provide us with the trade name, a brief product description, and the stage and method of application. And the second part of the submission form and application is the formula composition table. And I will go into a little bit more detail on how to complete this on the next slide. We are requesting a lot of information, so I am going to try and break it down a little bit for you. So on this slide, there's an example of a mocked up completed composition table, and we request that you provide, or you will complete one of these composition tables for each one of your products. Firstly, we are looking for the composition information for your product down to 100 ppm or 0.01%. And in this table, you will want to include all of your intentionally added ingredients in your product, as well as any residuals or impurities that are present in your final composition greater than 100 ppm. So for the first 3 columns, most of this information should be available on the ingredients safety data sheet or SDS that you would get from the ingredient supplier. So for the CAS number, we are looking for the CAS number of the active chemical in the ingredient. And sometimes proprietary chemicals will not have a CAS number disclosed on the SDS. So in this case, you can either write NA or proprietary, as I've shown here. The chemical name column, we are looking for just the generic chemical name that would be listed on the SDS associated with that CAS number. And for the trade name, we are looking for the unique product name given to that ingredient from each one of your suppliers. For all of these, as I've said, this information is likely available on the ingredients SDS. So when you're filling out this table, we do request that you try to copy it into this table exactly as it's listed on the SDS. So for the next column, we are looking for the function or ingredient class. And some chemicals can have multiple functions. So here we are really looking for the ingredients function as it is used in your product. And I've provided a couple examples of ingredient classes: solvents, processing aids, preservatives, things like that. The next column is the composition percent. So here we are looking for the percentage of the ingredient in your product's final composition. And again, we do ask that you disclose down to 0.01%. The supplier name, kind of self-explanatory, but it's the supplier, the company that you buy this ingredient from. And then we do ask that you include all primary and alternate suppliers. You would put each on their own line, and we do have a column on the application for you to indicate whether it's an alternate supplier or not. The last part of the application is we ask that you provide a copy of each ingredient's SDS. And again, that's just helpful for us later in the process, in the next step when we are obtaining supplier information, so we know what to reach out for. So you can go to the next part. Great. So the next step of the process is to obtain supplier information. And both of these programs do require a certain level of disclosure from each primary and alternate supplier for all intentionally added ingredients in your product's formulation. However, there are some differences between the two. So for the basic ZDHC MRSL Level 1 review, each supplier must complete a disclosure template, and on this template, they have to disclose if their ingredient contains any intentionally added substances that are listed on the ZDHC MRSL, as well as any residuals, byproducts, contaminants, or other impurities listed on ZDHC's MRSL Group B. And those are if they're present at any percent in the product, or if they have reportable limits below 0.01%. Then, per the ZDHC criteria, all ingredient safety data sheets, or SDSs, need to be prepared according to one of the options listed in the ZDHC Conformance Guidance document. And for example, some that are quite common would be GHS, which is the Global Harmonized System, or ANSI Z400.1. During the application stage, NSF will provide you with a template, and you can provide that template to your supplier. And we ask that the supplier returns them directly back to you, which you can then compile and submit with your formal application to NSF. So for the ToxFMD program, the process is a little bit different and a little bit more detailed. So for every intentionally added ingredient in the product, each supplier must complete a formula composition form, including a composition table similar to the one that you complete during your application stage. So again, we request that they disclose all intentionally added ingredients, any residuals and impurities present at present greater than 0.01%, and then again any ZDHC MRSL Group B listed chemicals present in the formulation at any level. And in addition to providing the ingredient composition table, there are some ingredient classes that may require additional information. So, for example, if there's a polymer present in your formulation, we will ask the ingredient manufacturer to provide some additional information, and the same is true for surfactants, enzymes, and things like that. And for ToxFMD, NSF will actually perform all of the supplier outreach and have the suppliers complete the forms and return them directly to NSF as part of our review. You can go to the next slide. Great. So the third step of the process is the formulation assessment. And again, there are some differences between the two programs. So first, for the ZDHC formulation assessment, we don't really begin our review until we have a completed application from you, along with the composition table, as well as all of the completed supplier disclosures for each of the primary and alternate suppliers. So once we have all of this information, NSF will review the submitted formulations along with all of the ingredient supplier SDSs and the disclosures to determine if the product formulation contains any intentionally added substances or residuals, impurities, or byproducts that are present on the ZDHC MRSL Group B. And this review usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the number of products. So you can go to the next slide. Great. And here is a slide discussing the ToxFMD formulation assessment. So similar to the ZDHC assessment, we can't really begin the review until we receive all of the necessary supplier information that I discussed in step 2. As part of the ToxFMD assessment, NSF reviews all chemical formulations and all of their ingredients against the ZDHC MRSL. And on top of that, for a more thorough review, we utilize additional assessment criteria to evaluate the ingredients against several human and environmental hazard endpoints. Some examples of the criteria that we pull from are the U.S. EPA's Safer Chemical Ingredients List, or SCIL, the Safer Choice Master Criteria for Safer Ingredients, as well as Green Screen List Translator or full green screens for safer chemicals. You can go to the next slide. Additionally, the ToxFMD program includes an analytical testing component to confirm compliance with the ZDHC MRSL limits for heavy metals. So when you achieve a ToxFMD certificate, it demonstrates that your product does not contain any ToxFMD not acceptable high priority ingredients, any intentionally added CMR and or PBT ingredients, and no chemicals are present above the limits specified on the ZDHC MRSL Group B version 1.1. And the review timeline for the ToxFMD assessment is closer to 3 to 4 weeks, again, from the receipt of all supplier information. So the next part here, I'm going to talk about the deliverables at the end of your review. So for all products and for both programs, NSF will provide a report detailing the outcome for each product. And additionally, for ToxFMD only, you will also receive a formulation score as well as a high-level scorecard that can be shared with a client or brand to easily communicate the results of the ToxFMD review. And then the next few slides do only apply to conformant products, so products that either are ToxFMD acceptable and ZDHC level 1 conformance. For these, you will also receive a certificate of conformity for each product trade name. NSF will also enter the information into the ZDHC gateway, allowing us to indicate your level 1 conformance. And lastly, the products will be listed on NSF's website. So the approval certificates and listings are all valid for 3 years and either will expire at that 3-year mark or a renewal submission will be required. If for some reason the product does not comply, the report provided at the end of our assessment will contain exact details on why it did not comply, calling out potential ingredients that you could then use that report to inform any potential formulation changes or ingredient swaps that may need to take place. And then once you've revised it, you can always resubmit it to NSF, and we can work with you to get it to a compliant place. So that's mainly all I have about the review process. So now we can open it up to any questions that any of you may have.
Yeah, and there's still time for folks to submit more questions through the chat. We've got a few that have come up so far. So Jeff and Hannah, feel free to bounce between the both of you to best please. Sure. So first question, how do we know which program is the right one for our company?
So I think my answer to that question is, one is, and it depends on your company, but are there requirements? So is a customer, so let's say you're a dye house or a fabric mill or a garment manufacturer, and a brand is requiring you to be level 1 conformant, is there a program that they're requiring? Some of the brands that we work with are fairly agnostic between, say, the two programs that we offer. All they want is level 1. It could be ToxFMD or it could be basic level 1. Others in the market are requiring, say, for instance, ToxFMD. That's the level. So that's the first thing. The second is, if you're not having that, what is what are your capabilities? What do you think when you look at that pyramid? Again, we're looking at level 1 here, but in level 1, what level of, let's just say, I guess, rigor, or what level of sort of compliance within level 1 would you like to aspire to? So needless to say, basic level 1 is not as rigorous as ToxFMD. So I think some of that depends on your own personal preferences as to how much you want to spend and how much you want to aspire to a higher degree of chemicals management. So that's my feedback. Hannah, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I think that's great, Jeff.
Great, thanks. Next question. How does this relate to other standards such as the Global Recycled Standard?
Well, so the Global Recycled Standard is largely a recycled content standard, so a material standard that Textile Exchange owns and manages. And as some of you or many of you may know, the GRS, in addition to the content aspect of it, material content aspect of it, has other requirements that have been bolted on. Social labor aspects to it, there are environmental management system aspects to it, and then chemical requirement aspects to it. So the GRS, in its section D, among several requirements in the chemicals section, is MRSL level 1 conformance. So the way we handle that, you guys, is that if you're applying for GRS, we have to, one, either confirm that the chemistry in use at your facility is already compliant through some level 1 program, and we confirm that with you through certification and checking into the gateway. The other is if not, we perform, the program here, our basic, what our recommendation is with the GRS is that we perform the basic level 1 assessment and provide the certification, and that enables us then to do the remainder of the GRS audit and certification. So I hope that answered the question. Fundamentally, level 1 MRSL is just one piece of the GRS standard.
Great, thanks. Question came in, what type of risk assessment testing should we do?
Risk assessment testing. I'm not sure I can answer that question quite honestly. It sounds more like maybe a strategic question related to chemicals management and how you feel about your operation. And again, risk assessment, that's a big topic. But if you look, let's just say at chemicals, what kind of, again, understanding what's material to you in the marketplace. Is it NGO exposure? Is it brand requirements? Is it your, other investor or customer expectations that are required? It's a hard question for me to answer. Risk assessment almost always varies from company to company in how they think about it, materiality-wise. But from a chemical standpoint, kind of goes back maybe a little to what I said before is, who's asking for this? Do you want to do it? And if you want to do it, I think realistically, as you look at, say, just these two programs and look at the pyramid, from an overall risk standpoint, you are reducing your risk in a number of ways with a level 3 assessment. Even probably a little bit more risk with level 2 and more risk with level 1, just because of the rigor and the intensity of let's just say, the requirements associated with each of the conformance levels. So I think, maybe just to summarize there, it's kind of always a lousy answer. It depends on your appetite relative to chemicals management, so where you think you are and what risk tolerances you want to be exposed to given the conformance levels. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and Jay, feel free to follow up if you have additional questions.
Sure.
As well. Last question we've got here, unless anyone else has any additional to ask, is the benefits around third-party verification and what third-party verification serves.
So if I understand it correctly, what are the benefits of third-party verification? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, so if we look at, I think all of us know in the industry that self-reporting, whether it's, well, many of you are familiar, say, with the Higg Index and the facilities environmental module, and self-reporting that's done to the facilities environmental module isn't as objective and validated as a third party coming in and verifying that self-reported information. Similarly with material content, say the responsible down standard or the responsible wool standard. If some factory were just to self-report that, hey, I'm compliant with the GRS, well, that's really not sort of generate the objectivity and confirmation that I think third party provides. And similarly here, that's why the level 0 is going away. ZDHC understands that there's no confidence level in self-reporting, and that's the purpose of the verification programs, and the purpose really of a third party being an integral part of that. Now that's not to say that there aren't flaws in the system. I think we're all mature and experienced enough to know that there are flaws. But when we look at the options that are out there in the marketplace now, to self-reporting, to second party, to third party, the general understanding is that third party verification across all these different sustainability attributes, not just chemicals, is the highest level of risk reduction, and I think the greatest level of sort of assurance and credibility and verification. So hopefully that answers that question.
I'd also like to add something on that note. So we do receive a lot of feedback from ingredient suppliers that they are being inundated daily with so many requests similar to the information that we request when we're reaching out for ZDHC or ToxFMD. And I think the resources sometimes can be limited on the supplier front. However, if they are able to take the initiative to have their ingredients reviewed through one of these third-party certifications or verification programs, you can argue that it actually would help make responding to those requests a little bit easier, because you have a more streamlined platform that doesn't require the supplier to provide their proprietary ingredient formulation to dozens of different folks and companies that are requesting it. Instead, at the end of the day, they can say, you know, we've already had this review done by a third party, and they've verified our information, and here's our certificate. Or, you know, here's our listing on NSF's website or the ZDHC Gateway, already verifying that we've done that work. So I do see that as a benefit.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a great point. So with that, it looks like we've gotten through all of the questions we've got in. Jeff, your email is up on the screen there if anyone has additional questions in the coming days. So they can contact you with additional questions if they think of something later. This webinar will be distributed later this week. Recording will be available on our website as well. URL in the lower right corner there. Jeff or Hannah, if you have any additional closing remarks you want to make, feel free. Otherwise, thank you all for joining.
Yeah, just real quickly, you guys, thanks very much. I know this subject, for those of us in the textile industry that are working through all these different programs and initiatives, from social labor to materials, animal welfare, etc. I know chemicals have been doing this, for over 10 years. The chemicals issue is one that's kind of natty. It's difficult. It's technical. It's one that I think, and justifiably so, people want to kind of put their head in the sand. But I mean, truthfully, this is one of the really, really natty, tough, but super important elements of our industry that we've just got to get better at. We have so many chemicals that are unmanaged out there, and I just encourage you to be strong and not look away and tackle this aspect of your product and your manufacturing, your production, wherever you are in the industry. And whether it's our programs, ideally we'd like that, but whatever you do something and get on that pathway of improvement. We really need to tackle this chemistry issue in our industry. So thank you for your attention. Hopefully we achieve the objective of informing you and helping you to be more educated and make better choices moving forward. And that's it. Hannah, anything?
No, I just want to thank everyone for their time and the questions, and that's it.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Hannah.